Can you talk more on crank arm length? Does it affect gear ratio, leg length? Which is the most common? I would hope that your crank arm doesn't affect your leg length, but here's what you need to know. Yes, your crank arm length does theoretically affect your effective gear ratio, since that depends on the number of teeth on your cog and lock ring, how big your wheel is, which includes tire size, and your crank arm length. Longer crank arms have more leverage, giving you a lower effective gearing with the same number of teeth. The same gear ratio will feel a bit easier to pedal with a longer crank arm. So why doesn't everyone just run the longest crank arms possible? Well, our body does affect it, and how comfortable we are extending our legs and our hips will determine how long of a crank arm we can go. For most fixed gear riders, because we have to pedal through the corners and we need more clearance in order to take sharper corners, most fixed gear riders ride 165 or 170 millimeter crank arm lengths. If you get a crank arm length that's too long for your specific body, it could lead to knee pain and hip pain. Whereas if you go shorter, you don't have that same risk of hip or knee pain. And on top of that, having shorter cranks makes it slightly easier to keep a higher cadence, since your legs don't have to spin as big of a circle compared to longer cranks. If your bike has tighter geometry, shorter cranks will also give you slightly less toe overlap if that's something that bothers you. Taller riders, say if you ride a 57 centimeter bike or above, could benefit a bit from running 170 millimeter crank arms. And if you're at a 56 or below, you might want to stick with 165. With that said, there's not really any drawback to sticking to shorter crank arm lengths, but you could potentially injure yourself on a fixed gear if your crank arms are too long. When in doubt, go with the shorter crank arm length. What are your thoughts on 49-14 gear ratio? I ride it all the time and it's good for me. If it's good for you, then keep riding it. 49-14 is a pretty high gear ratio for street use, and the problems with running too high a gear ratio, it could hurt your knees, it could be too high of a ratio to get you up hills, and you might not be able to ride on all the terrains that you want to ride. And if you're not strong enough to push a particular ratio, it will be a lot more inefficient than a lower gear ratio. You can see if your gear ratio is too high by taking a look at your cadence. Most people are most comfortable pedaling the bikes at 80 RPM. If you're pedaling significantly below 80 RPM, say 60 or below, on the terrain that you ride most of the time, your gear ratio is probably too high for you. Also, if your thighs hurt all the time after you ride, your gear ratio is probably too high for you. Although 49-14 is a pretty big ratio, if you have the muscles to push it and to maintain a comfortable cadence, then by all means, keep riding it. And speaking of crank arm length and gear ratio, our channel sponsor Wabi Cycles lets you tailor the fine details of your bike so that you can make it the most fun for you. Down to your tire width, the number of teeth on your chainring and your cog, and your crank arm length, because all of these smaller details add up to build a bike that you'll love to ride. And even if you don't know exactly what details you want, you can contact Wabi, and their very friendly customer service based in Denver, Colorado will be sure to help you get on a bike that you'll love to ride every day. So if you're interested in checking out the bike that I've had the most fun throwing a leg over, feel free to check out our channel sponsor, Wabi Cycles, linked below the like button. What are the consequences of running a bicycle tire the wrong way around? The tread on bike tires that are meant for street paved use pretty much do nothing and are mostly there just for looks and for marketing. The reason car tires and motorcycle tires have tread patterns is so that they can keep traction, especially under wet conditions. And a lot of motor vehicle tires have a V-shaped tread pattern. This is so the tires can squirt water out of the sides when driving through wet conditions so the vehicle doesn't hydroplane. The thing with bicycles though, it's near impossible to hydroplane on one unless you're bombing super hard down a wet mountain or you're actually superhuman. There's also the myth that if you run the tire tread the wrong way around, it'll make you slower. I have not seen any evidence to support that claim, so the consequences are nothing. But if you put your tire tread facing the right direction on your bike, that can give you a psychological benefit of making you feel that your bike is more well put together, which could excite you to ride it more. And it's the small details that add up to get you excited to ride your bike every day and be reasonably dangerous. What's your go-to chainring for each budget? If you're on a super tight budget, just upgrade your entire crankset and use whatever chainring comes on the crankset that you're upgrading to, or upgrade to one of the nicer chainrings. For a brand new chainring, around $50 to $70 will be able to get you something that is high quality and is worth your money. For around $70, I recommend the FSA track chainring or the Andel 144 BCD track chainring, which is also rebranded by some companies like All City. These chainrings aren't much to look at, but they're plenty round to keep an even chain tension throughout your pedal stroke, and they run plenty smoothly. If you want something a little bit nicer at around $110 to $120, I personally ride the 44RN or the AARN, the AA-RON chainring, whatever it's called. This chainring seemingly lasts forever. My brother has been riding the same 44RN chainring since 2010 or 2011, and it still runs smoothly. Chainring also looks really cool on just about any crankset. The thing with 44RN chainrings though, because they have a unique tooth profile, they make a distinct sound with a lot of drivetrain setups, which some people hate, some people love. I personally love it. And on top of that, they are made in San Francisco, California, if that matters to you. And if your meaty track thighs are thick enough to actually push enough power to feel flex in a chainring, then the Sugino Zen at around $170 has got your back. This chainring has been on the bike of multiple track championship winners, so whether you want something overkill for the streets or you need your gear to keep up with you at a professional level, Sugino Zen has got you covered. By the way, links to all these chainrings are linked below the like button. Can you do a segment and show other people's bikes and specs? Something similar to Fixie points without the roast. I like this idea a lot, but instead of just showing photos, which I think can get stale, I want all of you to send in your own video clips so I can do a proper scripted and written bike check for all your bikes. Just do a quick write-up, get some shots, even just cell phone shots are good enough. Give me your specs list and give me a quick write-up of the thought process behind building and speccing the bike and how you use the bike in your area and how you ride it. What you like about it, what you don't like about it. So if you guys want to submit your own video clips doing a bike check of your bike that I can then do a voiceover for, let me know if you're interested in the comments, and maybe we can get that rolling and have that be a regular part of the channel. Do you currently use a flip-flop hub on your rear wheel? If so, what are the differences in gears? My main ratio is 49/16, and if I want to go up into the mountains, I have a 19-tooth cog on the other side. Just wish you'd talk about Taiwan's lifestyle more. How are you riding? How do you manage scooters? Toting food home? Sweating? Night rides with sprints? Number one, yes. Sweating. Even just sitting here and talking to the camera, I'm sweating like a pig in a slaughterhouse. Now that summer's coming up and it feels like summer is here already, I actually may finally give in and start riding in shorts. So humid here, whenever you stop riding, you can just feel all of your sweat collect on top of your skin. But the bright side about riding in Taiwan, people are pretty good drivers. There's a lot of scooters, so people know to look out for scooters. They know to look out for cyclists because everybody and their mom and their mom's dog rides a bike here, since biking is such a big part of the culture. There's lots of excellent bike infrastructure like the river trails that run all throughout Taipei. You can find excellent food at all hours of the day, but because it is so dang hot and humid and sticky in Taiwan, I like to save most of my riding for the early mornings or at night. If you're interested in learning more about riding in Taiwan, feel free to check out this video I made on that subject. But I will make a ride video with live commentary riding here in Taipei very soon. Why fixed over single speed? Yes, single speed is a bit more practical because you can coast downhill, but if I wanted to ride a practical bike, then I would just ride a geared bike. Most people ride fixed for the simplicity and for the pure joy of it. No other type of bike gives that pure connected feeling with the drivetrain like a fixed gear. It has its limitations, but its limitations make it a whole lot of fun. Although riding downhill really fast is pretty fun too, so if that's your jam, stick to single speed. New to fixed gear riding, I'm torn between just start riding on a free wheel and try fixed when I get foot retention, and just ride fixed from the beginning. As long as you have front and rear brakes on your bike, I say just ride fixed from the beginning. Riding single speed does not prepare you from riding fixed. Although it seems like they're very similar on the surface, since they both have one gear, not being able to coast on a fixed gear is an entirely different way of riding. The only way that you can get used to riding on a fixed gear is riding on a fixed gear, because there's nothing else like it. After a week or two of riding fixed every day, you'll get used to it, and you may find that you don't really want to ride anything else. Thoughts on new versus used bikes, on practicality versus minimalism. Unless they're consumable parts on the bike, like bar tape, drivetrain components, tires, and tubes, I prefer to buy used bike components. The problem with the used market, though, is that you don't have as many options, and sometimes I just can't wait around for waiting for the specific parts that I want to show up on the used market. So although I prefer to buy used, I end up buying new parts a lot of time. And practicality versus minimalism, I just want to say, fixed gear riders, I know we don't make any sense, but not making sense brings me so much joy, and I usually lean a lot more towards minimalism, just because it makes me happier. Again, the fun of fixed gear riding is the limitation and making do with the limitation. If you want something that's wildly practical, ride a gear bike, and even more practical than that, at least in the US, drive a car. I ride bikes because it's fun, and having a pure minimalist bike makes it the most fun for me. I even took off my bottle cage just because it makes my bike a whole lot cleaner, and looking at my bike without a bottle cage now just makes me a whole lot more excited to ride the bike. This extreme type of minimalism, though, can get in the way. My advice is to strike that balance between practicality and minimalism. It's your bike and you're the one riding it, so find a way to tailor it to your wants and needs so that you'll have the most fun riding it, regardless of what hipsters on the internet such as myself say. And feel free to check out the fat 4 to 5-ish hour fixed gear Q&A playlist if you just need some background noise to help you get through the quarantine. Fixie famous shout out to Stand Strong 108, Anthony Deza, and Ryan Witt, helping to make these fixed gear videos possible through their support on Patreon.